Are you ready for the word?
Yes, sir.
Genesis 13. I will conclude our study of Genesis 13:2 today. Let it be known, however, that the subject matter I'm going to bring up today, I could do a 12-week study on it by itself, and we've already spent 12 weeks in Genesis 13:2. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to wrap it up in one lesson. We're going to move on through Genesis. Today's message is going to challenge our mindsets. Perhaps even your love for me. I hope not, but perhaps. Today's lesson is tough to hear and it's tough to teach. But I ask you if you're ready for the word, and it's the word that we're going to teach, so be it. And we love the truth, right? And we follow Torah, right? So no matter how hard it is to hear, having ears to hear, we hear. And we're not forgetful hearers who look into the mirror and then go away and forget what manner of man we are. Instead, we're hearers who become doers of the word. So let's read our text and let's get started. Genesis 13, look in verse 2. And Abram was very rich. 12 weeks we've looked at that verse. He was very rich in what? Cattle, gold, and silver. Silver and gold. So our subject matter has been about prospering or prosperity or becoming rich like Abraham was. He was rich in some assets, cattle, silver, and gold. This morning I want to present to you 3 questions that we all need to ask ourselves as we move on from this subject. And how we answer these questions is going to determine if we can and if we will be made rich by Yahweh like Abraham was. 3 questions. How we answer them determines the level of prosperity we will attain in our lives. Are you ready for the questions? Question number 1 is, who will we serve? Who are we going to serve? When we looked at the key principles in Abraham's life that made him rich, the first principle was that he chose the correct source for his wealth. So he knew who he served. He chose to serve Yahweh. And he saw and understood that this decision has benefits in this life and in the life to come. He didn't serve Yahweh to become rich. You understand that? He did not serve Yahweh to become rich. But he did serve Yahweh and acknowledge that Yahweh was El Elyon. You remember what that means? El Elyon? The Supreme One, the Most High, the possessor, he went on to say, of heaven and earth. So he would have served him even if he never became rich, because he is El Elyon. But Abraham was wise enough to understand that if you serve the one who possesses heaven and earth, you should be and will be blessed above and beyond those who don't serve him. Okay? Every man will serve somebody. He'll either serve himself, he'll serve his base desires, he'll serve Satan, or he'll serve some demonic being masquerading around as if he is a god. He might serve wealth, he might serve riches, he might serve his career. Every man serves somebody. But the wise man chooses to serve Yahweh. Joshua said it this way to the children of Israel. Choose you this day whom you will serve. It's your choice. He said, but as for me and my house, we're going to serve Yahweh. Perhaps we should start every day of our lives by looking into the mirror and saying that to ourselves. Just look at ourselves in the mirror and say to the man in the mirror who lives in this body, choose today who you're going to serve. And then make a declaration with our mouth, today I will serve Yahweh. And then choose to serve him throughout that day. No man who ever made that choice died with any regret. All men who have ever died without making that choice live with eternal regret. So, question number 1 is, who will you serve? The quality of our life is determined by how we answer that question. To the young among us, I say the greatest decision that you will make in your life is not where you're going to go to school, not what career you're going to choose, not where you're going to live. The greatest decision you'll ever make in your life is who will you serve. Choose wisely. Choose the one that possesses heaven and earth, the one who so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that we might not perish. Question number 2. A question that's going to determine if we can and will be made rich by Yahweh as was Abraham. Question number 2 is we have to choose how we're going to serve Him. Who we're going to serve and then how we're going to serve Him. It's not enough to decide to serve Yahweh. A lot of people say they do, and a lot of people say they have chosen that. But the vital question is, how will you serve Him? And there's only one way. Yahweh gave a book of instruction on how He is to be served. Yeshua, the Savior, said, "Do not think I came to do away with that book of instruction." What's the Hebrew word for the book of instruction? Torah. What is it commonly called in English today? The law. There are those who gather week after week claiming to serve the possessor of heaven and earth, the creator of all things, yet they claim that this book of instruction on how to do that has been done away with. This claim then allows them to serve Yahweh their way instead of His way. If they claim that book of instruction is gone, then they can choose how they want to serve Him. They choose a day different than the day He chose. They choose feasts and celebrations different than the ones He appointed. They choose to eat things that He forbids. How can they do that? They made a conscious decision to serve Yahweh, but to serve Him without His book of instruction. You know, you can't play baseball without a book of instruction. You can't play it properly. You can't play football without a book of instruction. You can't play basketball without a book of instruction. You can't play rook and canasta till you read the rules. There has to be a book of instruction. Now, how in the world does anybody even imagine that they can properly serve Yahweh without a book of instruction on how to do it? You cannot eliminate that book and properly worship Him. Yeshua taught in Mark 7 that there are those who take the book of instruction, they lay it aside, they make it void, and they reject it. And He said they do this so that they can teach for doctrine the commandments of men, and so that they can hold on to their own tradition. In that statement in Mark 7, He quoted Isaiah's sobering words about those people who do this kind of thing. He said, "In vain do they worship me. This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Howbeit," He said, "in vain do they worship me." This is Yahweh speaking through Isaiah. "Howbeit in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrine the commandments of men." So, if you teach that Christmas and Easter and Halloween and Sunday are holy, or can be made holy, and you reject the seventh day and the 7 holy appointed times of Yahweh, you're teaching the doctrines of men, and Yahweh said your worship of me is vain. What does vain mean? Useless, empty, to no purpose is the literal meaning. To no purpose. You are attempting to serve Yahweh, but your attempts are unsuccessful. Yahweh will not accept your worship or your service of Him if you eliminate His book of instruction. That's not me saying, well, I don't think you're doing it right. That's Yahweh saying, you're not doing it right, and I will not accept it. It's in vain. Your worship of me is in vain. So we not only have to choose who we're going to serve, we have to choose how we're going to serve Him. There's only one proper way, that way being according to the book of instruction, following the example of the Messiah, and receiving help from the Ruach HaKodesh to get it done. So, question number 1 is what?
Who we serve.
Who we serve. Question number 2 is what? So those 2 things set the course of our life and determine whether ultimately we will prosper or not. Who are you going to serve, and how are you going to serve Him? Are you ready for question number 3? Because this is where we're going to spend our time today. Question number 3 is this. With whom will you serve Him? With whom will you serve Him? Young people, again, hear me well on this. Choosing who you will serve with based on, well, he's cute, is not a good method of choosing. Well, he's nice. Well, she's pretty. Well, she is hot. Well, she's nice. None of those are good reasons to choose somebody. It cannot be your deciding factor on who you're going to go through your life with. You must choose to serve Yahweh with someone who has also chosen to serve Yahweh. And you must choose to serve Yahweh according to the book of instruction with someone who's also chosen to serve Yahweh according to the book of instruction if you want things to go well for you. Ignore me here and you'll be inviting into your life decades of misery and even generations of chaos. Heed me here and you'll bring into your life the blessings, provision, and protection of Yahweh for generations to come. With whom will you serve Yahweh? Now, for the rest of us who have already chosen, today is going to be about making sure we understand that we're in this thing called life together as partners. And if we're going to prosper, then we're going to have to operate in this partnership according to Yahweh's book of instruction. Got it? If we're going to prosper, we're going to have to recognize we're partners. And that we're going to have to operate according to Yahweh's book of instruction on how this partnership works. Not according to the way our parents did it. Not according to the way that suits us best. Well, for me and my spouse, this works best for us. No. According to the way Cosmo magazine says it should be. That won't work either. According to how a romance novel, a soap opera, or a Hollywood movie says it ought to be. That won't work either. According to some relationship therapist. That won't work either. According to the views of some women lib group. That won't work either. We have to partner together and work together according to the way Yahweh laid it out in His book of instruction. So I'm going to remind you this morning of a verse that's in the Bible that almost no church in America will teach or preach. They'll preach on the fourth commandment just to tell you that it's passed away. They'll preach on dietary laws just to tell you that those don't apply anymore. But most, if not all of them, will ignore this verse in the Bible because they just would rather not deal with it. That verse is found in 1 Peter 3, so turn there. Now we're going to read not just that verse, we're going to read several verses before it and a couple after it to make sure we put it in context. But this is a verse that most pulpits would rather not teach, preach, or deal with. 1 Peter 3, look in verse 1. Likewise, you wives, be in subjection to your own husband, that if any obey not the word, they also may without the word be won by the conversation of the wives. Seeing that Peter was dealing with women in his generation who were sold out to Yahweh but had married a man who wasn't. We find that happens so often in our day and time where a wife discovers truth, pursues it, but she's married to a man, didn't know what I said earlier, choose wisely with whom you're going to serve, didn't know the truth, after was married, discovered truth, and they've got a husband that's not sold out and serving Yahweh and serving Yahweh Yahweh's way. Peter writes to them and says, be in subjection to your own husband, while they behold your chaste conversation coupled with fear, whose adorning let it not be that outward adorning of plaiting of the hair, or of wearing of gold, or of putting on of apparel. Fix your hair up, put on jewelry, and put on nice dresses. But let it be the hidden hidden man of the heart, and that which is not corruptible, even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit, which is in the sight of Yahweh of great value or great price. The world places value on the outward appearance. And the world even places value on a woman who is strong, boisterous, and outspoken. But notice in verse 4 that Yahweh counts a quiet spirit in a woman as a thing of great price. It says there, the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit. Meek means humble and mild. Strong, but humble. Quiet means literally, that word literally means to keep one's seat. Undisturbed and undisturbing, peaceable and peaceful is what that word means. Undisturbed and undisturbing. Peaceable and peaceful. Full of peace. When Yahweh sees that in a woman, He counts it of great price. Verse 5. For after this manner in old time, the holy women also who trusted in Yahweh adorned themselves, being in subjection unto their own husbands. We'll go ahead and say this here. We'll point it out in another place. This is not telling a woman that she's inferior to a man, not telling a woman that she has to submit to men. The only one she has to submit to is the one she's married to. Submit to your own husbands. All men? No. You submit to your husband. You're not inferior to any other man, and you're not even inferior to him. To subject yourself to him means that you're in a partnership with him and you're acknowledging that Yahweh has designed how this partnership will work, and it works with him as the head of the partnership, and so you subject yourself to him. Listen to this verse. Listen, it says, old time, the holy women also who did what? What does verse 5 say these women did? Way before they subjected themselves to their own husbands, what did they do? Trusted in Yahweh. So they decided, they chose to subject themselves to their husbands according to the instruction in Yahweh's book. They put on subjection as if they were putting on jewelry and fine clothing because they trusted Yahweh. Yahweh said, do it. They trusted him, and so they put on subjection just like you would put on jewelry or put on a nice dress. Here's the verse that now takes us back to Genesis 13:2. This is the verse I was referencing. This ties us into Abraham. This is the one that almost no one will preach. Verse 6. Even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him what? Lord. Whose daughters you are, as long as you do well, and are not afraid with any amazement. Let's read the rest of the context, and then we'll come back and deal with this one verse. Verse 7. Likewise, ye husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge, giving honor unto the wife, as unto the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. So, Peter says, men, take advantage of a wife who submits to you, and what you will discover is that Yahweh will refuse to answer your prayers, and He will refuse to help you in your pursuit of things in life. He will refuse to answer your prayers if you take advantage of a wife who has subjected herself to you. There's balances there. Wives, submit yourselves. Trust Yahweh, submit yourself. Husband, take advantage of that and see if your prayers get answered. Now, it says here that you're heirs together of the grace of life. Grace is what? Power. It's the power of Yahweh to help in a time of need. Well, it says here in verse 7, we inherit that power together. If a wife will not submit, she's hindering that power from working in their life. If a husband abuses his position of authority, then he also cuts that power off. We're heirs together having access to that power. If she doesn't do what she's supposed to do, the power's hindered. If he doesn't do what he's supposed to do, the power's hindered. You see that? So it's a powerful partnership as long as we both pay attention to the book of instruction. All right? The husband has to dwell with her according to knowledge. Knowledge of what?
The book, the instruction.
There you go. Finish reading it. Listen to this. It says he's to give her honor. That's the knowledge husbands have to have. They have to know that Yahweh expects them to place high value on the wife who has subjected herself to him. The husband needs to dwell with her according to this knowledge. She has high, great value. And if he does not have that knowledge, he's not going to reap the benefits that are there for him. Now, let's go back to verse 6. Even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters you are, as long as you do well, and are not afraid with any amazement. So I want you to notice in verse 6, we're told that Sarah did two things, and she was able to do those two things because of one thing. She did two things, but there was one thing that enabled her to do those two things. Here's the two things she did. She obeyed Abraham. The second thing she did was she called him Lord. Peter said they are an example of what every wife should do. Now notice he says she was able to do those two things because of one thing. She was not afraid with any amazement. What does that mean? Think about it. Why would a wife resist doing the two things that that Sarah did? What two things did she do? She obeyed him, and she did what else? Called him Lord. Why would any wife resist following her example? Fear with amazement. What if he mistreats me? What if he makes mistakes? What if he makes bad decisions that hurts our family? What if he's not good at being the head of the household? What if I'm better at it? What if, and 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 all these what ifs are birthed out of fear. See? So that's the reason Peter said that she was able to do this because she had no fear. Now, submission is scary. So you have to conquer the fear so you can do life Yahweh's way. Do you actually think it was easy for Sarah to submit to Abraham, obey him, and call him Lord? Do you think it was just real easy for her because he was just the perfect man? No. He said, all right, let's start packing up, sweetheart. We're leaving Haran. We're leaving? Yes. Well, where are we going? Don't know. Then why are we leaving? Well, because Yahweh said to. Well, where did he say go? Well, he didn't tell me. He just said he'd show me when we get there. You don't think that scared her? But she conquered the fear. She refused to be afraid with amazement and obeyed him and called him Lord. Abraham asked her to tell the Egyptians that she was his sister. You don't think that was scary? Read the story. First of all, you're going to find out that Abraham did not demand that she do it. I'm the head of this household. You're going to do what I tell you to do. No. Read it. The King James, he said, pray you. In other words, I beseech you. I'm tenderly and kindly asking you to consider doing this. And also, men, notice that when he started that conversation with her, you know how he started it? With a compliment. Sarah, girl, you are beautiful. Oh my word, you're beautiful. And we can't go into that place without it drawing a lot of attention. Please consider doing this for me. He didn't take his place of authority and think he could demand things. He asked her, please. Well, you know she had to have some fear, but she was not controlled by fear. She subdued herself under his leadership because, listen, here's the reason she could do it. Why could she do it? She trusted Yahweh. Even when she didn't understand, she trusted Yahweh. And she was going to do this partnership Yahweh's way. Abraham gathered up his servants, left her and the other women and the livestock so that he could go wage war against 5 kings who had done nothing to him. They had just simply taken his nephew Lot. Done nothing to him. But they had ransacked Sodom and Gomorrah and kidnapped Lot. Abraham left Sarah, the other women, and the livestock, gathered his servants up, armed them, and went to war. You know, sometimes a man has to do man things. Sarah could have fussed and said, I don't want you to do this. It's dangerous. Let Lot take care of himself. It ain't right for you to run off and leave us here by ourselves. No evidence she ever said any of that. Abraham stood up like a man, made a righteous battle that was not his battle, his battle. Sometimes you have to. Sometimes there's a righteous battle that is not your battle, that you have to make it your battle, and Abraham did that. Sarah, in the midst of that, was still subject to him in his decision. Abraham took Isaac and firewood to make a sacrifice to Yahweh, and you know that story. My point is, and I'm not going to continue just bringing up illustration after illustration, my point is this: if any woman ever had reason to be afraid with amazement, it would have been Sarah. But even still, she obeyed and called him Lord. Let's talk about that for a moment. She called him Lord. Understand when we read that in 1 Peter, we're not dealing with a Hebrew word that's in reference to a deity. She's not deifying him in any way. We're dealing with a Greek word here that is a reference to respect for a position of authority. Lord, in the Greek here, kurios, is a word used to show respect for a position of authority. Here's what that means. Sarah, particularly in public, made sure that she always showed respect for Abraham's position of authority. The respect he had among his servants and the respect that he had in the community was birthed out of the respect he got from his wife. That's where it began. How could she expect others to respect him if she didn't set the example? Particularly, as I said, in public, if he requested something, here's what Peter tells us. Here's what Peter's saying. If he requested something of her, do you know how she responded? Yes, sir. She didn't question his authority. She didn't undermine his authority. She didn't demean him, challenge him, or attack him. She just said, yes, sir. Does that rub our fur the wrong way? If it does, then the question that arises is, what are we afraid of? No man can rise to the level of respect and prosperity that Yahweh has for him if his wife demeans him and challenges him on every decision he makes. If you want your husband to flounder in life, show him no respect. He will live down to the opinion that you have of him. And he will live up to the opinion that you have of him. Be like Yahweh. Well, you don't know what I'm married to. Well, be like Yahweh. What does Yahweh do? He calls things that be not as though they are, until the things that be not become what he says they are. Abraham said, we're leaving Haran. She said, yes, sir. Abraham said, we're going to Egypt. Please tell them you're my sister. She said, yes, sir. In Genesis 18, Abraham's sitting in the door of his tent and sees 3 men. You know what he did? You know what that man did? We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. He ran out of his tent to where they were, greeted them, talked to them, and then invited them to dinner. Then he ran back to the tent and told Sarah, hurry up, grind up some fine flour, crank up the oven, cook me 3 cakes. So Abraham's not the first, nor will he be the last man who invited people over for dinner and told his wife after he did it. Now, to be fair, Hagar and Ishmael were Sarah's idea. You agree? But when that all went south, you know what she said to Abraham? My sin be on you. So Sarah was not the first, nor will she be the last woman who made a mistake and told her husband, it's your fault. It just happens. Abraham invited those 3 men to dinner. He told Sarah to make fine flour to bake and to do it quickly. You know what she said? Yes, Peter says she said, yes, sir. Now, I can't believe you didn't check with me first before you invited them over. Don't you know what all I got to do around here? This tent's a mess. Shouldn't you have at least consulted with me? Don't you have any respect for me? She didn't do any of that. She just said, yes, sir. Here's the point. Don't miss it. Here's the point. Abraham and Sarah had a partnership. Abraham could not have done all that he did without this amazing woman in his life. And Sarah could not have enjoyed the amazing life she lived without this amazing man whom she nurtured, loved, respected, and took care of. They had a partnership. There are plenty of books written and TV shows dedicated to and lessons taught on how a man can be a better husband and all the things he needs to do. But few are those who talk about biblical instructions for the wife. So allow me to expound upon this subject for just a few minutes longer. Ladies, if your husband is going to succeed, he will never be able to do so working a 40-hour week. If you think he ought to go to work at 9 and get off at 5, or go to work at 7 and get off at 3, you're living in a fairy tale world if you think that he can become all he's meant to be doing that. Your husband is never going to succeed working a 40-hour work week and be able, attending every activity of every child in every week. And to give you his undivided attention every evening and every weekend, it's unrealistic. You have to decide what you want. Do you want a man who is devoted to you or a man who is devoted to Yahweh and Yahweh's plan for y'all's life? If he's only devoted to making you happy in all the ways that you demand that he do it to make you happy, then he will be restrained by your demands on his life from prospering. Your demands on his life will prevent him from prospering. In order to prosper and to provide for his family all that he wants to provide, he's going to have to give more than he really wishes he had to give. He's going to have to work harder and longer than he really wants to work. He's going to have to miss activities that he wishes he didn't have to miss. He's going to have to fight battles that he wishes he didn't have to fight. And for you to tell him, I don't care about the stuff, I just want your time, is to rob him of what it means to be a man. Submit to him, respect his position, not only as a husband, but as a man who is having to compete against every other man out there in order to provide for his family. Send him out the door as a warrior for battle, because that's who he is. Understand he will return as soon as he can, but right now he has to go do battle. When he does come home, make his return as the return of a victor and the return of a champion. Rather than fuss that he was gone so long, thank him for what he does. Embrace him, encourage him, renew his strength, make him happy that he came home. Men have to understand that their purpose is to create the best life they can for their family, and that's going to take time away from the family to do it. T.D. Jakes said it best, I think. He said if a man gives his time to his family, he has no money to provide for them. And if he gives his time to produce money, then he has no time for the family. It's a perplexing and frustrating part of a man's life. He has to give more time away from home than he wants to give, but he must never forget that all the time he gives is for his family. And he must make sure that they know that they are his everything. And that he must make sure that he does schedule time for them just like he schedules time for everything else. He'll never be able to give all that he wishes he could give. It'll never be all that he wishes he could do. But he has to schedule some time. It's a partnership designed to bring into that family the best that can be brought. And what I'm saying is, to bring the best that can be brought requires more than a 40-hour work week. We can't do it in 40 hours. It'll take long hours and long days and many years to succeed. But if everybody pulls together, the family ends up blessed. Ladies, understand that you'll have to give yourself to chores that you'd rather not do. Taking care of and developing character in children. You'll have to do that. You cannot demand that your husband be some cosmo fantasy man who comes home every night with flowers, goes on dates every Friday, attends every function. Forget the cosmo fantasy man. Get you a Yahweh serving man who's pursuing the blessings of Yahweh for you and your family. Subject yourself to him. Help him become everything that he is meant to be as a man, and you will not regret it. Sarah did it, and so can you. Just have to turn loose of the Western mindset of what a husband has to be and all the things he has to do in order to be a good husband. Turn loose of the Western mindset. Turn him loose and watch Yahweh bless it. I'm going to close with just a few passages of Scripture. Feel like I'm plowing in new ground here this morning, but let's go to Ephesians 5 for just a moment. Ephesians 5:22. Peter said it, now Paul said it. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as unto Yeshua or to Yahweh. Not to men, but to your own husband. For the husband's the head of the wife, even as the Messiah is the head of the church or the assembly, and he is the Savior of the body. Therefore, as the assembly is subject unto Messiah, so let the wives be subject to their own husbands in everything. The word submit there, first of all, notice it says submit yourself. He cannot and should not do it for you. You have to do it. He cannot and he should not. You have to do it. That word translated submit indicates that it is an internal battle that rages. It indicates that there's a war inside of you, some part of you that resists submission, and you have to win that war. You have to submit yourself. The actual word is hupotasso. Hupotasso. Hupo means under. Tasso means to arrange something in an orderly fashion. So to arrange something in an orderly fashion under something. So what it's saying is arrange yourself in a position of support and assistance to your husband as the head. In 1 Corinthians chapter 16, you don't have to turn there. You might want to make mark of it though. 1 Corinthians 16:15, this word hupotasso is used, but there it's translated as addicted. Listen to this sentence. I beseech you, brethren, you know the house of Stephanas, that is the first fruits of Achaia, and that they, those in that house, have addicted themselves to the ministry of the saints. Hupotasso. Addicted. What's an addict? What does it mean to be addicted? Did y'all check out on me? An addict is one whose mind and body are consumed with lust, cravings, and desires for a substance. Could be tobacco, could be alcohol, could be drugs, could be any number of things. We'll take that translation of the word, hupotasso, addicted there, and carry it back to Ephesians 5:22. And what it's saying there is then, ladies, become consumed with a desire to assist your husband to be all that Yahweh created him to be. Become consumed with subduing yourself under his leadership. Verse 24 of Ephesians 5. Therefore, as the assembly is subject unto Messiah, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, even as Messiah also loved the assembly and gave himself for it. Men, never forget, you're not giving yourself to obtain possession. It says there, you're giving yourself for her if you do it right. Giving yourself to possessions. It's not giving yourself even to success. It's giving yourself to her and for her. She and your children are your purpose to push. Give yourself for them. Provide for them. So ought men, verse 28, to love their wives as their own bodies. Listen to this. He that loves his wife loves himself. If you love your wife, you love yourself. If you don't love your wife, you don't love yourself. Well, what does that mean? Read the next verse. For no man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourishes it and cherishes it, even as Yeshua the assembly. So, what it means to love is to nourish and cherish. Encourage and promote her development as the one who does for the home and children all the things that you cannot do. Encourage and promote her development. Show gratitude, show appreciation for all she does to assist the partnership. Show gratitude, show appreciation. Verse 33. Nevertheless, let every one of you in particular so love his wife even as himself, and the wife see that she reverence her husband. Reverence. What a word to use. This word literally means to stand in awe of. It's phobeo, from which we get our word phobia. I'll let you study that one out. Revere him, stand in awe of him. If you do not, then he cannot stand in a place of authority with confidence before others. He needs your reverence in order to stand tall in the world. Let's go see what Colossians 3 says about the subject, and we'll bring it to a close. Colossians chapter 3, verse 18. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as it is fit in Yeshua. Husbands, love your wives and be not bitter against them. There the word is again, submit. So it's not up for debate. It is the proper order. How sacred is this arrangement? Do you know that that arrangement is so sacred that Yahweh himself will not violate it? Go read Numbers 30. Numbers 30 is about making vows, and in particular about women making vows. And Yahweh says that if a woman makes a vow and her husband hears her and says nothing, she is beholding to that vow and must fulfill it. But if the husband's not there and she makes a vow, when he hears of it, that may be hours later, it may be days later. But whenever he hears that she made that vow, he has the authority to nullify it, to make it void. Yahweh said, if he nullifies it, then I will forgive her and not hold her to the position that she has to fulfill it. Yahweh said, I'll forgive her and I'll release her from that commitment. You know what Yahweh is saying? Yahweh is saying, this vow that she made is not between me and her. This vow that she made is between me and her husband. And I have given him the place of authority in the home. And if he says no, then that's the end of it. Now that's a pretty sacred, a very sacred, let's say that, that's a very sacred position of authority, and Yahweh putting his stamp on how he expects things to operate in our homes. Men, read the next verse though. Husbands, love your wife, and we already saw what love means. It means to nourish and cherish. Husbands, love your wives and be not bitter against them. Bitter means to be irritating and unpleasant. Come on, men. The Bible says, don't bring your troubles home. Don't bring your garbage home. Understand that you've been out in the world and you've been in a battle. But don't bring that warrior mentality back to the house with you. These are not your enemies. This is not your battle. Don't snap at her. Don't bark at her. She's doing more than you can possibly imagine to make it possible for you to go do what you do. So do not be irritating and unpleasant to her. Don't be a Nabal. Go and learn what that means. You can read about it in the story of David. Just look up the word Nabal if you don't know. Nabal was a slosh brain. That's actually what his name meant. Don't be a Nabal. Never be irritating and unpleasant. Nourish and cherish. It's a partnership. In my opinion, the greatest college football coach that has ever lived is a man by the name of Nick Saban. If you disagree with that, that's fine. I think he's the greatest that ever lived, and that there are many things that would back up that opinion. But that achievement has brought financial blessings to his family that you and I would probably have a hard time comprehending how much financial blessing it has brought. How many hours a week do you think he had to work to achieve the things he achieved? 40? 45? Oh, did he get up to 48 hours a week, you think? Do what, Marie? 80, 90, 100.
Whatever it took.
Whatever it took. Actually, I saw an interview not long ago. It was last year during last year's season, when, Nick got tested positive for COVID. And he was stuck at home for a week, quarantined. And she said that he had an office upstairs. And for the first time in 40 years, she got to witness what one of his days was like. Decision after decision after decision, phone call after phone call after phone call, intensity, even at home, how intense he was and how long his day was and how much effort and energy he put into doing what he did. She said for the first time in 40 years, she got a glimpse into what one of his days was like. You understand, he missed a lot of events and a lot of activities at his home to accomplish what he accomplished. But he carved out a legacy for himself and his family that will carry into many generations. It's evident that he didn't neglect his family because of the great admiration they still have for him. But he couldn't be there and do what he was doing. Do not for one second think that he could have done what he did without Miss Terry handling everything else that he couldn't do because of what he was doing. She had to take the load of everything else. The home, the family, and who knows what else she had to deal with. Do not think he could have done this without Miss Terry understanding that her husband had a drive inside of him to be the best that ever walked this earth, and that it was her job to encourage that and support that. She understood that in him was a hunger to not just coach, but be the best coach that ever walked the planet. And she encouraged that and nourished that and helped him get there. She understood that it would have been a grave mistake to demand that he devote more time to her and less time at work. Because they were willing to do what others were not willing to do, they now live life at a higher level than others will ever live. So, ladies, all I'm saying is you have to decide what you want. Do you want a Cosmo man? Or do you want a Geber? A mighty man of Yahweh, a man who serves Yahweh how Yahweh wants to be served, and serves Him with you as His full supportive partner. He can rise to levels beyond your highest dreams if you assist Him according to Torah. I'm going to close with this story, and I'll not do it the justice it deserves. I wish we had a TV here, media here. I would just play it for you, because Nick can tell it far better than I. Perhaps you've heard it, but perhaps there are some who have not. Coach Saban tells a story, and it's very fitting to close with this. He tells a story of how his high school not long ago had what they called a Nick Saban Day as part of a homecoming celebration. He said that he and Terry grew up in the same area but went to different schools. He wanted to date her, and he says that he tried to date her for 6 years, but she never would, and mostly because she was already dating a guy named Mickey Schaefer. But he also said it had something to do with the fact that she was a city girl. He called her the Queen Bee and Drum Majorette. He described himself as a country bumpkin who worked in his dad's service station. Full service station, where he said you not only pump gas, but you changed oil, you changed tires, you fixed tires, you put on mufflers. He said, I was the young man that walked around with grease under my fingernails all the time. She was the Queen Bee. He said he stayed after her for 6 years, and after 6 years, she and Mickey Schaefer finally split up, and she finally agreed to go out with Coach Saban, and we know the rest of the story. They married. Now, 40-something years later, they have gone together to his high school for Nick Saban Day. He said while there, he discovered that Mickey Schaefer now owned a gas station. He says he could not resist a drive-by. And so he went to this gas station owned by Mickey Schaefer. He said because he wanted to point out to Miss Terry what a wise choice she had made when she chose him. He drove to the gas station and he said to her, looky there. If you had married Mickey Schaefer, that's where you would be. He said, she said. Bull excrement. If I had married Mickey Schaefer, he'd be the head football coach at the University of Alabama. I think that's a perfect illustration of what I've been trying to say now for quite a while. We're in this together. He lifted her up. She lifted him up. And that's what she was making plain to him. Yes, you lifted me up from where I could have been, but I also lifted you up from where you might have been. They prospered together. They were partners together of the grace of life. There is a grace available to us, but we have to realize that we are not just husbands and wives in a romantic relationship. That's Cosmo. We're not just husbands and wives in a romantic relationship. We're partners together working with Yahweh's grace to provide the best present and the best future that we can for our family and creating a legacy for generations to come. A partnership has to be formed where we work together with one another. Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yahweh lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. His name is put upon you. He shall bless you.